Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the wrap-up of 2020 Homecoming Week here at Nova Southeastern University. And we have a great webinar here this afternoon with NSU Athletics with some of our coaches. If I can introduce myself, Mike Momini, Director of Athletics here at Nova Southeastern. Been at the university 20 years in a few different capacities as a coach and an administrator. And today we're with us two of our best, and Julie Lemaire, our head coach for women's softball, and Laz Gutierrez, our head coach for baseball. So we look forward to the next hour. We have some questions here that have been pre-submitted, but we look forward to hopefully having a good exchange of information here, let you know what's happening with NSU Athletics, talk a little bit about intercollegiate athletics, and share some of our experiences both here at NSU and beyond. So we'll take some questions at the end. As I understand it, we've had some previously submitted questions, but we're just going to sort of free flow here. So appreciate everyone joining us today. And hopefully this is one of many webinars that we can do to help promote intercollegiate athletics here at Nova Southeastern, and just get you an inside look of what's really happening here on normal times, but also we'll touch on certainly some COVID-19 challenges that we're all facing. So with that, again, welcome Julie Lemaire, Laz Gutierrez, baseball and softball coaches here at NSU. They bring a tremendous amount of experience, both in intercollegiate athletics as well as professional athletics. But, you know, I couldn't be more proud to work with them. They're, like I said, they're two of our best. And, you know, as athletic director, or as administrators and as coaches, you know, we feel all, and I could speak for all of us here, you know, we feel very privileged to work with our over 300 student athletes here at Nova Southeastern, get an opportunity to you know, really impact their lives while they're here pursuing their education, and of course, trying to get the most out of them athletically and win championships. So with that, let me, ladies first. So let me introduce our head softball coach, and she can give a little more of a background. Julie Lemaire, very successful coach, but we're so happy that she's here with us in South Florida as our head women's softball coach. Julie?
Thanks for the introduction, Mike. As Mike mentioned, my name's Julie Lemaire. I'm the head softball coach, 5 years already at Nova, so that has flown. Prior to that, I was in the Midwest for I guess about 10 years almost at 2 different institutions out there before my stint here. So overall in college athletics, my first head coaching job was as a graduate assistant in 2004 and 2005. So I've been a little bit all over the place, from Illinois, where I played at Quincy University, to North Dakota, then to Lynn University as an assistant. And then I did a head coaching stint at Fort Hays in Western Kansas, Emporia State, and then now here at Nova Southeastern. So I think I'm the one that he was mentioning with a lot of experience all over the map in terms of locations.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Julie. And we'll get into some of that experience. And again, it's great to have you here. You do such a great job with our young student athletes, and a great job as an ambassador for our entire athletic department. Let me introduce our newest head coach. He didn't even get a whole season in, so I've yet to really give a full evaluation on how he's really doing. He also gets to be under the microscope, since I was the head coach here for the first 10 years of this decade. And, you know, but now, you know, we're so happy to have Laz Gutierrez. We've actually had a connection for a lot of years, but welcome, Laz. I guess you're probably anxious to get to next season in your first season being cut short with COVID, but please welcome the one and only Laz Gutierrez.
Wow, what an introduction, right? Yeah, so hi, everyone. I'm Laz Gutierrez. I'm the head baseball coach. Very lucky to be here. And like Coach Momini said, you know, I'm very fortunate that when Coach Momini was a young coach at the age of 25, I played for him as a 16-year-old. I think it was the first time that I had ever been on a plane, and he flew me out to Euclid, Ohio. So born and raised in South Florida, very lucky. played at some outstanding programs. And then once I was done playing professional baseball, I became a 12th grade American government teacher at Coral Gables High School. And I was the head baseball coach there for two years. And then I went to Barry University as I served as the pitching coach and the recruiting coordinator. And then during my third year, I was hired away by the Boston Red Sox and spent 14 years in the Red Sox organization, served in several different capacities. And then last winter, I was fortunate enough to get a call from Coach Momini and lucky enough to start this journey here at NSU Athletics. And I think what I tell everyone, this is a truly special place, and only, I got only 30 days in, right? So before the season got called, but I'm excited to be here. This is a great place and a special place.
Thank you, Laz. And I appreciate that. And maybe we can jump into our first segment, but I would lead into that. We're certainly very proud of what we've built here. I've been very fortunate. I feel the same way as Laz, and I know Julie, but just fortunate to, again, serve the university, and at the pleasure of two different presidents, our current president, George Hanberry, and of course, Ray Ferrero, who first hired me, and in first 10 years spending as a coach, and now this last 10 as an administrator. So I feel as lucky as you heard Laz talk about, to work with so many great coaches, so many great leaders, but most especially keeping our focus in on so many great student athletes that have come through this campus. So I guess, with that said, let's talk about, and I'm already going to switch it up on you guys, but I think what maybe leads into that, let's talk a little bit about culture, right? And team bonding and team cohesion, and how do you cultivate a culture? And a lot of people throw that around, but I think it would be very interesting to hear from both of you, again, with someone with a lot of college experience, and then someone with a lot of professional experience, but now here serving together, just two offices down from each other. What does culture mean to you, and how do you build that within your programs? Julie?
Well, actually, it's something that's interesting, because that also is, I guess, could go aligned with a lot of things that have changed over the course of college athletics and coaching. When I first started, I don't even think the word culture was ever even said. It was just work, grind, and then over time, we started realizing that, the athletes, this is like a family, and this is their lives for 4 years, and we expect so much from them and so much out of them that, then the wave of culture started becoming more and more popular. People started recognizing the more tight knit you are, the better they'll play with and for you. And so I think that, I'm very fortunate that my assistant, Taylor Fuller, her and I have really found, I think, a common ground in it. She was a player in that era, where I would not have considered myself a player in the era of that. I think I'm young, but not that young. But so she's really helped bridge that gap for me. And we do some great things for the girls that I just think, we can continue to add on. And I think that she has some great experiences of what they've done. And we've even added some things this year, because COVID is so different. But do you want me to jump in on some of the things that we do, or you want to let Laz talk about the importance with him, or do you just want me to go ahead and kind of talk about the softball side?
Yeah, talk about the softball side, and really, what does culture mean, and how do you maybe go about that? I think maybe dive a little deeper into, again, people have different definitions of it, and it's a word that's thrown around. I'm with you. It was definitely not talked about when I was either playing or certainly maybe at the end of my coaching career, but it's like, we can throw that around, but what does it really mean? Because I think it can mean in my opinion, it can mean so many different things, but you can't just say it, right? You can't say, oh, hey team, we're going to have a great culture. Well, we have to instill that as leaders of those teams. So give us maybe some specific examples about what you guys do as far as identifying that and then living it out.
Well, I think especially from our particular program. We talk a lot in the recruiting process just about what our expectations are, and hopefully that when we sell the product, we're selling something that these players want to live by. They want to live what we say, the Shark way. They want to live, Nova softball, and hopefully it's something that they become very proud of when they leave here, is the idea that we've really tried to hammer hard and instill, because I'm very close with my family in particular. So when I think of siblings and my parents and stuff, like, that's how I want our kids to think about Nova softball. And I think we've had some in the program that really, on their 4th and 5th years, like, understand that and have done a really great job of instilling it with our young kids. So for us, I would say this is kind of our first year of like feeling it and really feeling like, I would say accountability. And so culture to us is like, this is what not only Coach Lemaire and Coach Fuller expect, but this is what we expect as teammates. And this is what we expect, you guys to be able to do, to have our backs, whether it be on or off the field. And then, so for me, I guess culture is a huge umbrella for us, because it's like doing things the right way, but it's also, what do you want out of your experience? And so we want to try and build as much of that as we can for them. And if we don't know what they want out of their experience, it makes us really hard to build that culture. So we've started, we implement some things, which I think is a great idea. And actually, Coach Fuller added it when she came here. That was kind of my task for her, was like, I just want more ideas. This is, a little bit, I can hammer the internet, but what did you like when you guys did it? And we do some things right from the get-go where we divide up into one-on-ones. We call them like weekly dates. And like, we have kids that had played together for 2 years and didn't know how many siblings some of their teammates had early on. And I was like, I just didn't even, I'm such a talker that I'm thinking, how did you guys ever go through like that? Everybody would have known how many, and so I think it's interesting, because as coaches, sometimes we get wrapped up in, just going about our business, and we think they're handling that stuff on the inside. So it's definitely made me better in terms of, just how our kids can help each other. We also have a new thing where once, like at the start of the year, we started this year, at the start of the year, we hand off, like, as coaches, the first week, what we think is someone that did something that particular week the Shark way. And so, like, we actually call it like green light and on our program, because it's a joke whether or not you're green lighted or red lighted because you're slow or fast on the softball team. So, but they call it the green light, like, because you're doing it the right way. And so when we give it the first week, it's given from coaches, and it's not just you hit the winning run, way to go. It's, did you do the right stuff off of the field? Did you do something extra? And then every week after that, the kid has to give it to a kid, showing that they, see that they're doing stuff our way within the softball program, the right way. And then hopefully, if you don't get something, you recognize maybe you're not doing something the right way, even from teammates. So I think it just gives them, a little bit more pride in the culture, rather than us just say, do it this way, this way, this way, this way. It's the kids get to say, this is not how we do things. And so, I've learned to appreciate how invested they are when you hear them talk about it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And you probably can't see it, but on that whiteboard back there, and it's no kidding, it says the Shark way. So again, we all use that terminology, but what is your definition of that? What I also heard you say was accountability and cohesion and getting to know them beyond the softball field, and shared experiences, and taking more ownership of what that means. And again, all those things, there's no clear definition of culture, right? I mean, because it's self-defined, in my opinion. So great stuff. And Laz, we're going to say mental skills and the importance of sports psychology here in our next little bit. But what about, what have you seen? And you've seen it obviously at the professional level more recently than at the college level, but even going back to your college years, and a very successful player down in Coral Gables, and then, also coaching in our conference. But what's your thoughts on this team culture, and what does that mean to you and to the NSU baseball program now?
Yeah, listen, I think one thing that to the point that both of you have made, right? This thing, culture, is such a big animal and such a big beast that you could throw so many things at it, right? But I think one thing that we could say for certain is that when you have successful organizations, successful programs, they do have a great culture in place. And what that means to me, it goes beyond the X's and O's. It goes beyond the wins and losses, right? It goes to empowering these young people to be the best version of themselves on and off the field. And I think for us, it starts with setting the standard, right? And with the baseball program here, we talk about accountability, we talk about respect, we talk about resiliency, and we talk about being competitive, right? It's our ARC standard. And we talk about those standards on a daily basis, right? Whether it's in the way that we coach, whether it's in our behavior when it pertains to what type of effort are we giving in a daily basis? Are we showing accountability by going to the classroom? Are we showing accountability by working hard when no one's looking, right? And I think as coaches and leaders, those are some of the things that we could ingrain in our players, right? And create those habits so that they're able to pass it on to the next group. And, one thing that we've done, we've established, our leadership council. And I meet with those guys on a weekly basis, and we talk about a leadership theme, whether it's how do we hold people accountable, not so that we could beat them down, but to show them how to be better, right? And how to get it right the next time, right? And so we talk about these different themes throughout, and we encourage these guys to hold each other accountable. And I think at the end of the day, when you see this, when you see these kids lead themselves, the name on the front of the jersey becomes much more important than the name on the back of the jersey, and I think beyond that, right? I think, Mike, you mentioned it, and so did Julie, the shared experiences, at the end of the day, when we come back and we talk about our time here as Sharks, we're talking about those experiences that we lived together, and no one else could talk to those experiences. And I think that's what creates that tight bond that you would only see in a family setting. So we talk about our Shark family all the time. And I think those are things that are critical to continue to hone and shape that culture to whatever it is that you value, right? And I've always said this, I was very fortunate that during my time with the Red Sox, I was part of 3 world championships, and the last two, 2013 and 2018, more closely connected to it. But the one thing I will tell you is it was amazing to see our babies, our 16-year-olds, go through the minor league system, go through that grind, go through that journey, and then get up to the big leagues and become leaders, right? And live to the values that they were taught throughout. And that to me is powerful. And that's what allows culture to be a living, breathing thing.
That's great stuff, Laz. And I'm going to put a wrap on this segment because you're we must have ESPN or something, across the video screen here. I know we're down the hall from each other. But to me, culture, some of the things, it's sustainable success over time. It's making an impact when you can. What kind of legacy do you want to live? And again, it's so self-defined, but it also brings the cohesion of that team together. When we won the national championship in 2016, it was about, one heartbeat, right? And that's been used in the Florida Marlins had the same thing. We had our own version, one belief, 43 guys, those kind of things bring people together. Because the fact of the matter is, in our business, we spent so much time together, sometimes more time than we spend with our own families. We better be, back to Julie's point, be able to talk to each other about other things than just balls, strikes, outs, and baskets, right? So, how do you leave the uniform in a better place than you found it? And again, the baseball example, There was a coach, very successful coach, Greg Brown, between you and I coaching that. But can you lay groundwork and find and then leave it for the next person? Because again, also unique in our business, because it's a 4-year cycle of recruits and players and all that. You have to leave a legacy, and you have to leave the uniform in a better place you want to have a successful, sustainable program. So if that makes some sense, I think, and if you talk to kids like that, which maybe we can touch on that, what has changed over the 5, 10, 20 years, is maybe how we communicate to student athletes, and again, I have done it long enough. And before we go any further, I do want to clarify something Laz did in his introduction. He was 16 years old. I did bring him to Euclid, Ohio, my hometown. But I was 18 years old. No, yeah, I wasn't that much older. We were comparing ages, but again, it's crazy to have those connections. But in all seriousness, it's so much has changed, and as leaders and as coaches, especially when you're working with young people, right? The 18 to 22-year-olds just keep cycling in and out. So I believe a great coach at our level is able to adjust to those generations that are coming through and coming onto our teams. I saw myself having to make adjustments just in my 10-year window here to the different generations of kids that were coming through, more than just the culture piece. It was like there was more communication needed. Julie said it earlier. I mean, I don't want to put me in her category, but she said it, so I'll say it. But like, hey, there was no questions asked. You put a practice plan up, just go and do it. Laz, you're old enough too to know that, right? I mean, Coach, Coach Morris down there or whoever it may be, that's like old school. It's hard to think of ourselves as old school. Maybe for me, it's easier. But like there was a transition there where we had to almost relearn how to coach in the sense of communication. So do you have just a couple comments for either one of you, and then we'll move on as far as that communication piece, because I think it's important of how we
and I agree with you completely, right? Like the way the kids communicate today, or not even kids now, right? Different generations communicate differently. They have go-to types of communication. But again, we live in an era where we have to have radical communication, right? And I empower our guys to communicate. Don't take it for granted that everyone knows how you feel. Don't take it for granted as a coach that everyone understands what you're trying to say. One of the things that we've included in our approach is, what type of learner is this kid? Does he want to hear it? Does he want to see it? And so, by using these communicative instruments, it allows us to become better teachers and better communicators. That way we individualize how we communicate with each individual player or student athlete that we have. So I do think, to your point, it is critical. There's never enough communication, or there's never too much communication.
Which is different than it was 10 years ago, which was different than it was 20 years ago. Julie?
Yeah, I laugh because I often tell the girls that when I was a player, we had a calling tree, right? I mean, like we didn't have cell phones, and like you had to, coach called the first person, they called you. If they missed you, they skipped a person and kept calling that person. And the girls are like, what is a calling tree? And I'm not even that old, is what I tell them.
It's a group text.
But I'm like, but you're right. There's so much, they're used to instant feedback in the world that they live in. So like us as communicators, and then I think too, even from the coaching side, the product that we get now is often lesson based. They've had communication from someone coaching on a regular basis. They have one-on-one attention, then they go to coaching. So I think that's something too, where not only the communication on the outside of things, but the communication actually coaching has changed as well. And even sometimes maybe it's telling them you don't need to be communicated to every single. So I think there's definitely an adjustment, but it's 100% different. And I think it's been good in some aspects, but I think it's just, we just have to, like Laz said, recognize what kind of athletes we have then, because they're not all, nearly as similar as I would say they used to be in terms of not being used to over communication in that. So I think it's been a challenge, but like you said, a good one in terms of if you're willing to adapt.
Yeah, and you're almost forced to adapt. And again, thinking back, I mean, it was like, am I really going to do this? Am I going to really not use the phone tree? I got to really group text people. I mean, what is this? I got to use team sponsor. I mean, this is crazy. So, and do I got to put up a practice schedule, and then I have to really explain why we're doing this today, right? Because you got to lead with the why. I like saying in our business now, and again, Laz, you said it, and I want to make this point. As coaches, we approach it as that we're educators and teachers first. Because it's no different. We just have our classroom looks a little different, right? I mean, we just happen to be on a baseball field, a softball field, a basketball arena. We're still teachers at the end of the day. So again, and we stress that big time in our culture, right? And in the way we approach things. And you gotta lead as knowing that you need to teach, which is the same as coach, but it's more. Teaching to me means more than just teaching the X and O's. There's so much more about that. So yeah, that has definitely changed, how you go about that. We worried about over communication in the past, back in the day. Now there can't be enough communication, right? Because if they didn't get the email, the text, or, whatever, they saw it on Twitter, they might not have gotten the information, right? So I'm not quite sure this generation would have done well in our phone tree days.
I know.
You know what I mean? And no cell phone days, but it is a little dangerous, and that's maybe for another time, because that to me is a big effect. Let's jump into, this mental toughness, mental skills, the importance of the mental side of the game, right? We all know to get to this level and to play at this level, there's got to be a certain amount of physical ability. But what about the mental side of things? Of course, Julie, you and I, we can probably step back and let the PhD Coach Gutierrez talk about it. But again, I do want to let this be his little segment and talk a little bit, because it is another thing that we've had to adapt to. I mean, I guess I heard of sports psychology and I took a few classes in sports psychology, but like it really needs to be interwoven in what we do almost on a daily basis. Because the mental toughness for me is that edge that gets you above what you have physically. But that's my thoughts. I am nowhere near this next gentleman's qualifications to talk a little bit about mental skills. And tell us what that, in your mind, Laz, and what you, in your experience, the impact that has on collegiate athletics.
Enormous, right? Enormous impact. Not only at the collegiate level, but at the professional level. I mean, in the world of leadership, and I mean, it's we finally have come to a point, Mike, that we've realized that we got to treat the brain like any other part of the body, right? That we have to train it, we have to condition it. And so we've gone beyond the psychology, right? Psychology is always looked as this pseudo-science to a certain extent, almost like an art, right? But now with technology and a better understanding of neuroscience, we understand that the brain is the motherboard and it controls everything, right? So, the way I explain it, I believe the mental side of the game is the bridge that allows you to integrate your physical talents on a consistent basis. It allows you to reach your potential on a consistent basis. So, I believe that we need to integrate this into our teachings, into our coaching on a daily basis. If we want our kids to be mentally tough, mentally resilient, then the only way to do this is by integrating mental skills into our daily coaching, And again, I think if you look at mental toughness, what is mental toughness? Is it a guy, a player, whether it's female or male, just, let me push through this? Or is this a person that's able to cope better with stress, right? And if that's the case, right, what are the skills that we could teach so that they're able to cope better with the stress, so that they could apply their physical abilities on a more consistent basis? So, one thing that we've integrated, we do mental skills every day. right? So right off the bat, we do our mental minute. We start off practice. Actually, let me take a back step. When we stretch, we do 3 minutes of breathing, right? And then when we meet as a team, we do our mental minute of the day. And, what do we talk about? We talk about self-talk. What are we telling ourselves? Because we know that conversation, that internal dialogue that we're having is affecting how we're going to look at every single situation, right? We talk about the breath, right? We understand how the breath has complete control over the body, right? And the nervous system, more importantly. We talk about imagery. So we try to integrate all these different components into our coaching, give you an example. If we throw a bullpen, this is old school stuff. We'll have a hitter stand there and call out whether, as if he's hitting, call it out before the pitch hits the catcher's mitt, whether it's a strike or ball. So we're training the brain to identify, whether the ball is a ball or a strike sooner rather than later, the other day we were doing conditioning, and at the end of each sprint, I had them get a barbecue skewer, a little skinny skewer, and start getting these little heck nuts, and try to stack them up, right? The only way you're going to stack those up if you control your breathing, right? So I think what we've seen throughout, we have a better understanding that the brain is the motherboard, and now we have concrete evidence because of technology. We have a better understanding how we train this and incorporate it into daily coaching. And if you look at professional sports throughout, right, every team, at least in professional baseball, I should say, has not only one guy, you have 6, 8-member teams of performance coaches, mental coaches. And we could look across the pond. I think the Europeans and the Australians had it right before we did. They've had this in place for at least a decade and a half. And if we look particularly into the British Olympic programs, the British have finished third in the Olympic counts, Summer Olympic counts, the last 3 years, 1 medal behind the Chinese, yet they have a fraction of the athletes that the United States and the Chinese have. So, I think as time goes on and we continue to understand the brain better, you'll start seeing even more technology, more strategy integrated into the coaching philosophies of people.
That's great. And again, I think the takeaway there that I'd like to underline, and Julie, I'm going to ask you a follow-up to that, of why is it important and what does it mean as we convert to wins and losses, right? We've talked about a lot of things, and I was the first one to talk about wins and losses after 36 minutes. So, but I want to get to that. But last, to me, you literally, in your practice plan, have a mental skills minute or 4 as part of your practice plan. Right. It needs to be intentional. There's this practice. I can't see that. But anyway, I believe you. And I think it's great. And then again, the kids buy into that. So then it becomes important to them. And then it becomes important in the fabric of your culture. Right. Because if they start believing, to use this cliche, they're going to start, to what you say. I would say believing, then achieving, but believing they can reach their full potential. Because in that given moment, they need to.
Yeah.
So, Julie, why is mental skills and mental toughness so important to the end result?
Well, I think something too and Laz didn't actually touch on this, but I'm sure he believes and thinks the same. But, I think one area, in addition to obviously the expert and everything that Laz says that I don't know, one area I've found really beneficial with the mental toughness outside of it is for injury, and just like the ability to be able to battle with injury, understand the difference in injury. Is it pain? Is it soreness? And I don't know, like there is a mental piece of that. And I think we've had some very successful young women, and I've watched young men the same because of that. And, they not only maybe how they handle the injury, but sure on how they handle the rehab and the bounce back and the comeback from that is I think even more mental for some individuals than others and in some situations. So I know that's one area where I really I guess rather than just piggybacking everything that Laz says, that I really see being a huge benefit for especially the college athlete, because in reality, they're here to compete, and that separates them.
Yeah.
I think that's an awesome point. And I'll let you in a second, Laz. Again, I just found another one. I know Tom LaFleur is out there, and I appreciate everybody sticking with us. We're going to get to your questions, but like, there's so many topics that's spinning through my head, like just on that. But I think that's a great point. I would add to that and dovetail. Yeah. And it's such a short window that they have the opportunity to compete in 4 years.
Yep.
They're trying to, and we're trying to get them back faster than, there's a lot of injuries, that whether it's overuse injuries or serious injuries. How are they going to handle it when they come back? Certainly the serious injuries. Laz?
No, and just to piggyback right on what you said and Julie said, listen, and I think the key, whether it's injury, whether it's just performance, is providing the kids with tools, right? Whether, again, some of the simple mental skill tools that we talked about, because the one thing I don't want people to walk away from this panel or from this segment is, hey, mental skills is just motivating guys or motivating your players. Listen, first of all, if you're not recruiting motivated young athletes, then you're not recruiting the right athletes, right? Number two, even though that motivational speeches and getting guys, pumped up, and listen, that's an injection that lasts for a second. It's a vapor and it's gone the next, right? How we sustain true mental skills teaching and developing is by providing tools. So I just want to make that point, which I think we do that as coaches, right? I think we've always done that. Now we're able to label it a little better.
Well, people are more comfortable to talk about it.
Right.
It's
True.
like mental health, which again, somebody hopefully keeping track. That's another segment. We'll get into our AIM program, but all important because now we know and we're comfortable with, admitting that the brain's the most powerful muscle in the body. I mean, my longtime assistant, Ray Romero, used to say that. He was always like, and that was always the trivia question, and nobody can answer it, right? Certainly not a 20-year-old. Oh, my arm, coach, I gotta have a strong, no, not really. Because you can have a strong arm, but if you're mentally soft here, that's not going to do it. The last, and I'll wrap this part, is, and Julie mentioned the adversity piece, right? Mental toughness for me is how you overcome adversity. If you were 0 for 10 that weekend, how are you going to bounce back and play? If you had a game losing error that night on Friday night, how are you going to turn around and play again on Saturday? That's to me where mental toughness comes in. Yeah, it's the, you got to have that. That was, the grinder and the guy's going to run through a wall. But it's the kid that maybe not say anything, but he's got to be back in that lineup. And he's going to be back in that same situation again. How did he handle failure and leverage that to be success the next time? That to me is mental toughness. Okay. Of course, I guess the most current event is COVID-19. So, I mean, this could be a 6-hour session. We would never do that to anybody. And it could be different every day. That's all I would say from my seat. This has been by far the biggest challenge I've ever had in my professional career. And the responsibility level of an athletic department and 45 employees and 350 student athletes is immense. However, we're getting through it, and we'll ask, Laz and Julie some, what are the impacts that it's had on your athletes? Of course, 2 spring sports here, just to remind everybody, whose season ended abruptly on March 13th. They're 20 games into the season, not even halfway through the season. And COVID hits. Intercollegiate athletics was one of the first things that just came to a screeching halt and was stopped because of higher education. Colleges and universities stopped. And then those kids were all asked to go home. I was literally with our swimming team in Northeast Ohio at Nationals, and we were there 2 days. And March 13th came and it stopped, and we had kids on the plane the next morning to come home and then dispersed from there. What effects on your particular team has COVID-19 have, and how are you dealing with that? Jewel?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, please.
Well, I think dating back to the spring, like you said, I do think from then to now, all included, I have been rather impressed with my young ladies, to be honest. When it came to last spring, I mean, for us in particular, we were off to the best start we've been since I've been here, and I have kids that have, been through an awful large roller coaster ride and getting there. And I think last year felt good, and we felt like we were where we wanted to be, as a program and moving forward. So I think that for us even made it a little bit harder on them. But the way they, I think again, communication with them and being able to talk to them and talk with them about, we're not the only ones going through this, and this is bigger than us, and this is bigger than anyone that we know. And so I think that they really had to become adults and rational thinking very quickly. And then how they handled the spring and then the summer and coming back. But they're college kids, and this is not what my college experience looked like, or any of ours. And I think it's just, it's awful to think that that's the case, and their whole livelihood and what they would do on a normal everyday setting and through the weekend is just, I would say, a bit unfair for the normal year. But they have done unbelievable in handling it, and they've really had each other's backs and helped each other through it. And they've really tried to do their best to do our part. That's the most that we can ask, is that they do our part. And I know they don't like sanitizing balls every day and like doing that, but I mean, it's been easier for me to come up with field jobs. but they put the mask up, they do the sanitizing, and it's just I, in a sick way, I'm like, this is really going to make them like really good grown adults and really teach them some lessons. So I think, it can be a great thing long term. It's just, I'm just so proud of how they've handled it.
Yeah, and I would affirm that. I mean, all of our student athletes, it's been amazing. Here we are in November, and we had that stoppage. We didn't know what we were going to do in the summer. We bring everybody back. So all the student athletes did come back. Maybe a handful that couldn't come back because of their international status or whatever. And then we began practice, towards the end of August. We had a re-socialization period, but again, a lot of practices in masks. I am so proud of the adaptability of our student athletes, and it starts with you guys as our coaches, hey, not the ideal thing. This is what we have to do, and they're doing it. And again, they have to make some adult decisions, right? They have to do some adulting here, whether they want to or not, about things that have nothing to do with hitting a ball or shooting, basket. It really has to do with decision making and what they're doing outside the 2 hours of practice. So, it's certainly a day-to-day and a very fluid, dynamic situation. So Laz, what do you have to say about the COVID-19 and, how you're handling it now, and maybe how you handled it back in the spring?
Yeah, let me start off by saying I am extremely lucky. I have an amazing group of kids. I mean, let's take it back, right? Like, these guys get a new coach a month before the season starts, so they're already dealing with that. And then, we're going into the season. We start playing our best baseball right before COVID hits. We're tied for first in conference. We're about to play University of Tampa. We get off the field, and I get the call. Hey, season has been postponed, I think, at that time, and our kids are so resilient. I don't know if I have the best team in America, but there are the most amazing kids. And these kids, we remain in contact throughout. We would have team meetings throughout the pandemic, just to make sure everyone is okay. And I think we can't forget the social connection component to this, right? All of a sudden, these guys go from being around each other, this tight-knit group, and now they're by themselves in their homes. I mean, with their family, but not in their regular routine. So we wanted to create an environment where we could stay connected, where we're able to provide them with the latest information and so that they could see each other's faces as well, right? We got kids from all over the country. We tried to provide them with some type of curriculum, on our end. Again, very lucky, we were able to do mental skills. So I was calling for favors from all these mental skills experts from all over the country. Each coach was assigned to specific individual players, so we connected with them individually as well. But I think for me, one thing that cannot get lost in this, the NCAA comes out and provides these seniors with a waiver to come back. And what is not being reported ever, that truly it's up to each individual institution if they're able to bring them back. And I'll tell you what, I'm proud to be part of this institution. I'm proud to be part of this athletic program because we were able to bring back our kids. And those kids, those 7 seniors, I had 6 out of the 7 that decided to come back, that again, had a new coach that they had only known for a month and a half. We were able to reward them and let them come back if they wanted to. And I've said that story 100 times, and I'll probably say it 100 more times before the calendar year is over, because I think it's a point that really illustrates how lucky we are to be part of this athletic department and university.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And again, that's, the COVID thing is probably another segment of how we've dealt with that. But I would want to underline, and Julie, you had your seniors come back. You didn't have.
Yeah, I had a couple injured that called it. I mean, one was already on 6 years.
Right. So
Yeah.
I would say, like, to that point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So, one big decision point last spring was, and just for those of you who didn't know, the NCAA all spring sport athletes in baseball, softball, golf, tennis, once the season was halted, it was halted so early that the NCAA granted another year of eligibility. Well, that's nice, but then each institution had to decide. I'm proud that I had the support from the leadership in Dr. Hanbury and Dr. Harry Moon, and the people like that I get to work with, and I'm fortunate that they supported the decision that we brought every student athlete back that wanted to come back. That's about as there was a lot of them, because we have a lot of student athletes, but the ones that wished to come back, we were able to grant them a year of eligibility, and they're here now. So as we go on, I'm going to get to some of the questions here. And a lot of them had to do with COVID, so I waited till the end. We all are practicing right now. We do have the intent to play all 16 of our sports this spring. We postponed our fall sports, soccer and volleyball, to the winter term. We have postponed basketball and swimming to the winter term, as we call it. So right now we have a competition plan that we'll be presenting to our presidents. We, meaning the 11 institutions of the Sunshine State Conference, we'll be presenting them to the presidents, and we have been over time, but there'll be some final decisions probably early December of what that really looks like. They certainly are going to be a very truncated type season, a shortened season. Someone asked here, I answered that, complete a full schedule. It won't be a full schedule, but it'll be a full schedule that's competitive amongst all 11 Sunshine State Conference teams. Most likely scenario in all of our team sports, it'll be Sunshine State only play. There'll be no out of conference type of play. As I look at, baseball and softball coaches, but for the basketball coaches and things like that, right now it looks like it's going to be Sunshine State only conference play. There's a lot of reasons behind that. A couple questions about out-of-state schools coming in, out-of-state. Right now, we have a non-out-of-state travel policy. I would say that's a universal. So our teams are not going to be going out of state in this moment. A lot of that has to do with travel time and what, just some restrictions. People haven't thought about this, but there's going to be restrictions on charter buses. There's restrictions of how many kids that can be in a van. And I would say the best general idea, and I've said this a lot, one of the reasons for all the postponement of collegiate athletics across the country is we had to figure out all these logistics and procedures. We had to figure that out before we can play again. So again, a lot of us are practicing. Of course, you can see a lot of college football, and that's just a different animal, and they have a little more things on the line than 99% of us. That has nothing to do with D1, D2. That's just a different animal. TV rights and money and things like that. So, but most of us had to pause this for so long this fall semester to figure out so many policies and procedures that are going to be all driven by the health, safety, and welfare of our student athletes and our staff. So that's first and foremost. So that's driving all our decisions. There are fiscal, there are some decisions made for financial reasons, but most everything, 98% of what we're doing is based on the health, safety, and welfare of our student athletes. Not only our athletes, but it has to be consideration when we're going to play Barry, Lynn, Tampa. We have to be conscious of creating a safe environment for everybody to compete. So I hope that it makes some sense of why we're doing Sunshine State. We're going to have protocols and our athletic trainers who have been so critically important. That was another question in here. How is the cancellation of affected athletic trainer staff? Will that continue through the spring? I mean, they have been critical through this whole process. They are our medical professionals and that work with our teams, but in this case, they are the frontline workers, if you will, on this COVID piece. They've had to be trained in contact tracing, as an example. So all of us are being asked to be pushed out of all of us are being pushed out of our comfort zone. I can tell you that. I got to speak for myself, but I see some yeses. We started here as coaches and administrators, and now all of a sudden we've become, trying to provide information about COVID and medical things. Again, all in the spirit of our student athletes. We intend to play, but nothing's guaranteed. I think before the first of before Christmas break, we're going to have some public decisions of what we're going to play or not play or intend to play. There's a testing question that has to be answered. Of course, that is also a big hurdle before we get to begin to play. We have to have testing protocols in place, tests available, and the ability to give tests, COVID tests, before we start playing outside competition. So there's a lot there. I think I touched on everything maybe that has been asked, but let me jump to some questions here. I guess this is from Sandra here. Have you started to recruit 2022 athletes yet? Anybody want to answer that one? Where are we at in maybe our recruiting cycle? And have we started recruiting 2022 athletes yet?
I can jump in, Laz, if you want from mine while you're, okay, perfect. Obviously that's 100% case by case, program by program, but I do think everyone's big talk and concern is simply that COVID has changed a lot of the recruiting I think like approaches that we all had, because now we have student athletes that have a year back that are potentially staying, and we thought we would be replacing them. I know because of that, we actually, yes, are currently looking at the 22 class, but our particular situation is we don't have nearly as many needs in that class as we thought we would have at this given time. But I mean, I think that everyone, I would say people are looking a little further out this year because of COVID than they would on the regular years in some sports, because of the simple fact of having more return roster players than others. So I think the answer to that in short is yes, but again, just a matter of the need of each program.
Yeah, same here. We because of the pandemic, we have a surplus of players, but I think the lifeline of any program is to continue to acquire good talent, good representatives of the university and the baseball program. So we are. The current situation does, like Julie said, allow us to look a little further ahead and also maybe look at some 2023 prospective student athletes. So to the question, yes, it may be more strategic than it's been in the past, and the needs may be less, but we are out there looking.
So recruiting continues. Again, it's certainly different, and we've had to adjust that, and that could be yet another topic, Mr. LaFleur. I think we might have answered this. Have the NSU athletes reacted to measures? How have the NSU athletes reacted to the measures that we've taken to adjust to COVID times? We're in the business that our livelihoods depend on decision-making of 18 to 22-year-olds. So I'm not going to say it's been absolutely perfect, but I feel very lucky to what we said from my seat, and I'll let Laz and I think Julie may have touched on this. I mean, they have done a phenomenal job. One thing that we did was, and I might have copied it from one of my colleagues up in the Big Ten, but we called a Shark Pledge. And we had all of our student athletes and our staff sign the Shark Pledge that they will follow all the protocols. I mean, they weren't allowed to come back to campus or practice before they signed the Shark Pledge. And we have it printed out in our offices. And basically, it's a long list of, a pledge to follow all, local campus COVID protocols and wear your mask and do the right thing. So that has served us well. And it also is a good piece to serve as a reminder when things aren't going well, or maybe some people have gone outside to do that. But I think Laz and Julie, I mean, our student athletes overall, not just in your programs, have really embraced and have been mature about, the way they've reacted to the measures we've taken.
Yeah,
Okay.
no question. I mean, our guys, and again, like you said, I think the entire athletic department, our guys were just so grateful to be able to get back on the field and have their passion or their ability, to get back to playing the game that they love or practice on their skills. So they've, I wish they would follow all the rules like that all the time. I mean, some of these guys put double mask on, so they've been awesome.
Next question. Have we had any pushback from our athletes or their parents on canceling of seasons, similar to what we've seen in other colleges around the country? The operative word being the questions about canceling. We've only postponed to this point with the intent to play. So we haven't technically canceled anything. Of course, there's been a lot of questions. And one of the things to really put our arms around, it's not like we have all South Florida kids. We have student athletes. I'll try to get my numbers correct. Abby will do my fact checking. From 32 different states, and I think like 22 different countries. So of course there's a lot of questions. I would not use the word pushback. And I'll tell you a couple of things that we did to address that. We honored every athletic scholarship of our student athletes, whether they returned or did not return. 314 out of 320 returned. So the NCAA also during this COVID time has allowed an opt-out option. They would have had to do that by October 1st. So if somebody on Laz or Julie's team by October 1st, hey, I'm not feeling safe, mom and dad want me back home, not a problem. Scholarship honored as long as they stayed enrolled. They can go back to Ohio, Canada, or South America. So the NCAA has allowed for us to be, but again, that's been the feedback to this point from student athletes. It's been widely accepted and understood. Of course, there's been questions. One I get asked almost every day, will there be in-person attendance allowed at spring games? So I assume you mean all games that we plan on playing: basketball, soccer, baseball, and softball. At this point, we do have a plan for having a limited amount of attendees. It's probably right now, if we had to make a decision at the end of the day on Friday for next week, I would say that's going to be limited to family and friends. Of course, again, with the spirit of safety and health, there's a lot of logistics that have to come. Right now, it's going to be a very limited, given what's going on, but we'll continue to monitor that. That's driven by county and state regulations, as well as the venue, right? So the campus, we were talking about Hard Rock Stadium, how do they decide? That's driven by Miami-Dade County and that venue. At NSU, it's going to be driven by NSU, our athletic department, Broward County, and the Rick Case Arena. So it'll probably be limited, and that's all safety precautions. How does COVID and the return of seniors impact incoming 21-22 classes? I'll leave that to the coaches to answer. I assume that that's also speaking of recruiting, and he went to touch on it because, of course, if you think about it, I'll tell you guys up here, well, what we talked about before, we had seniors return, Julie only 1, but Laz 7. We also brought in kids that we signed, so we have large rosters. How do you see the return impacting the classes of 21 and 22 and beyond?
For us in particular, we actually had a fairly large 21 commit situation. So we're fortunate that our particular situation is fairly well lining out in terms of that. But we were already probably on what I would consider a trim 22 class, given that. But it's like I say to coaches all the time when I'm recruiting, or parents that ask, the recruiting is constantly like it's a constant revolving door. You know, a kid may quit, a kid may change their major and decide that they have to focus on that instead. They may have to, there's a lot of different pieces that I think we continue to keep every class open because of that. But yeah, I think COVID is definitely going to be a factor for the early looks and early committing and signing of some of those classes, because it's simply time has to just cycle through and see if we, maybe a player that we recruited as a first baseman doesn't necessarily play there and play somewhere else. So then now we need a first baseman. So I think that it's constantly changing, just as it is every year. I just think there's a little bit more panic with the COVID piece. But we're definitely in a situation where we're still looking for those classes. It's just, once we get past the 21 class, we have to let some time take over with our current class and what we think we have in that 21 class before we get on to 22s, 23s, and 24s. But, I actually have a unique situation this year where we have a kid that was through our dual enrollment. Maite Lascano was coming up on her senior year here, and she was a dual enrollment for pharmacy, one of our top student athletes in softball, and she would have had to have quit this year. And so I initially would have been to take on pharmacy. And we've been so fortunate that the chaos of COVID and the less time on the field and the maneuvering of courses and stuff has actually allowed her to play another year. And so there's just some unique situations that have and that too changed our recruiting, because we didn't lose her as quickly as we thought. So I think there's positives and negatives. Just people have to be a little bit more patient with how our classes shake out from year to year versus I would say a normal year.
Yeah. And Laz, before you give a quick answer, then we'll have maybe one more question from Mad Max Gallner. We got to end the day that way. I mean, why wouldn't we? But I would say this whole COVID situation, I don't think should get lost. We really believe, and we've seen it, and we're going to see more. There's opportunities that are going to come out of this crisis. There are opportunities for all of us. And I don't want to get on some soapbox. I'm talking about in life, but for us, we have found that there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this bad, to really dumb it down. So, and we're seeing it, and we're looking for those kind of things to try to be innovative and try to be creative. And we found new processes and new ways of doing things that's going to make us more efficient. I never heard of Zoom. I'm a little Zoom fatigued right now, but that's just because it's Friday afternoon. But I mean, how about talking about communicating with people across the world, your student athletes, how to become more efficient. But anyway, I would say, even with all this, we've found some, and we're continuing to find some good opportunities. Laz, quickly on sort of the impact of your 21-22 class.
Yeah, no, I think similar to Julie. I think every situation is unique. Obviously, our roster is a little larger now than what it normally would be because of the seniors that we brought back and the recruiting class that was in place here. So our approach has been identified our needs and just recruit those needs, identify guys that could fit those needs that we have right now. So a little more strategic, and we're allowed to be a little more patient to find that right fit for us.
Yeah, good. Related, and this will be our last question. I appreciate everybody tuning in today, but it's related to the same question of this recruiting, and it is from Mad Max Gallner, the stat man. His question is, with the new incoming players and the returning seniors, how do you anticipate handling the balance of keeping all your players happy in terms of playing time? Leave the toughest for the last. It is five after 5 on a Friday. But man,
Is that for you, Les?
you know,
Mama, how do you let Matt Max ask that question? That is a
hey, I think Morgan was handling questions on the backside. So these things are just coming through. I'm lucky I can even open the chat box. I'm lucky I can do that. So.
wow. Hey, listen, on our end, complete transparency. The kids know the situation that we're in. They understand this situation is much greater than the NSU baseball program in itself. They know that every day they're out competing. And, one of the things that we talk about, it's not only about who you are as a baseball player, how do you perform on the field, but what kind of student are you? How do you represent this program? So all these different things are coming into play, and things that we've preached in the past, that we've highlighted, how we want you to behave off the field. I mean, those are now very highlighted because playing time is in the balance, just because we do have an inflated roster and we do have more options than we typically do have.
Good. Jewel, I know maybe not you, but sort of, I mean, keeping players happy, that if someone has an answer for that, I might go back to coaching, but the balance of time, I think with the less games and more players possibly. You have something for that? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're still kind of in a fortunate situation. I mean, we had a great group of seniors last year, but they had some great opportunities, one with nursing, one with PT, and then, we had a couple injured that decided it was time for the body. So we're not nearly in the situation that Laz is in particular. However, I think, on the regular, this is a thing. Regardless of your roster size, you're always trying to figure out how to balance playing time and how to, keep players happy, quote unquote, if that's how you want to say that. And I think the biggest thing is, it's like sort of we talked before, communication is everything. So regardless of, you're not going to like every role that you play in life, is what I tell them. So like your job someday may not be exactly what you want it. Your role for that particular job may not be what you want it. And I think we just try to relate it to that as much. And I think this situation is absolutely no different. We tell them what exactly it is that they could do to get more playing time and where we see them being able to get more playing time. And then it's up to them to be able to take the initiative to work toward that. And then also, like Laz said, like know their role in the situation and then be able to try to do something about that. And then I think how you handle that shows what kind of teammate and program kid you are, and to decide whether or not you're going to be the kid that's willing to sacrifice that want for playing time, as we all want them all to play, or we want them to want to play. It's just not realistic in any given year. So I just think that, that's where it's our job to talk to them about programs and this experience being so much more than about their playing time or about them. Obviously if it were about playing time, we wouldn't have, 20, 30, 40 kids on a team where you put 9 on the field. So I just think we need to continue to communicate with them, give them the opportunities to be successful, and help them understand that like sometimes you come up short, but you can play a different role also.
Very good. Laz, Julie, always a pleasure to be on the same screen as you. Top left, top right in my world.
Yeah.
I want to thank NSU Alumni Relations for partnering with us. I hope for the participants that there was something that you learned today. But again, Gabby, her team, Raphael, Barb, and of course, Abby and Morgan, who make everything happen here in NSU athletics. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We understand this is going to be recorded. And until the next time, we appreciate everybody's support of NSU athletics, Nova Southeastern University as a whole. And everybody stay safe out there, stay dry, and go Sharks.
Thanks.
Thank you.